Buckle up, this is gonna be a long one. I cut off all contact with my father over 10 years ago when I turned 18 and graduated high school. And I have not looked back towards my mother since she gave up custody of me to my father as my sophomore year of high school. I think I was 15 years old. And that was, at this point, almost half my lifetime ago. What are you doing, Kojo? Well, there's nothing behind it. There's nothing in it to do. It'll just be a 2D. I often get a lot of flack from people about the way I talk about my parents, especially if they don't know me. They're new, they've never met me before, whatever. But then there's like the flip side of it where people who actually do like listen to my story and listen to what happened, the way I deal with things, like they understand, but they also commend me on like the way I've reacted to it all and what I've done with my life, because statistically I've looked at like the information and the statistics on things. If you take the life I had growing up, I should not have the life I do now. I should have gone in a completely different direction. And I have been told that I should talk about this more with people because I have a viewpoint of this kind of situation that isn't common and that it might help somebody. So I'm gonna talk about it, and if you guys have any questions, you want to talk about it yourself, share your story or anything, let me know in the comments. Leave whatever kind of comment, question you want down there. I will read every single one of them and I will respond to every single one of them. And maybe I'll even make another video if I think it's an important enough question or topic to discuss. But for today, I'm going to talk about why I don't talk to my family, why I have no contact with my family, and what family estrangement looks like when you make that choice and when you do decide that that's the best option for you and that that's the healthiest option for you because your family is not worth saving. So, let's dig in. Kojo, you did me do it. There's a Kojo back here. He's my cute, adorable little baby boy. What are you doing, dude? Don't destroy my curtains, bud. Love you, Kojo. Okay, when I was 18 months old, my mother had a schizophrenic break, and it totally destroyed my family. It totally altered my future as a human being in this world, and I don't remember it. So there was a lot of information I had to learn from other people as I grew up to understand what happened to me as a child, as I was 18 months old. And that was a very interesting journey for me, and it was very difficult. It was really difficult, I want to say the most difficult, to understand facts and reality when my mother is mentally insane. She's a schizophrenic. She sees things that aren't there, she hears things that aren't there, and she imagines things that aren't really happening. And as a child growing up, that's all I ever knew from her. And it was like, I don't want to say I didn't understand, because there was a part of me that did understand, because I knew myself, right? I knew what I was doing. I knew what I saw. I knew the facts that were in front of me. I could see what was going on in real life, but then in her head and the way she acted and the things she said, and she was supposed to be a role model, right? I'm supposed to look up to this woman. She was my only caretaker as a child, because I didn't know my father until I was in high school. Like, I only had my mother to look up to, and I couldn't look up to her because she was crazy, she was lying, she was making stuff up. And as a child, like, there was a part of me that didn't understand, but it was that I didn't really understand her, and I didn't understand why she acted that way or why she treated me that way, because I didn't know she was a schizophrenic as a child. I only knew that later when I got old enough to understand, like, what is mental illness, and everybody explained that to me. And it was very difficult for me to, like, differentiate between her fake lies that she told me growing up that I believed because I didn't know any better, and then learning from other people what really happened. Because I love you too, Cujo. Well, come on, get out of there. When I was a child, right, growing up, like 3, 4, 5 years old, when my mother told me something, I believed it. And then when I got older and I heard the other version, I thought, well, one person's lying here, right? One person says this happened, one person says it didn't. And on one hand, I have my mother, who I did not trust. I did not believe her. I knew there was something very, very wrong with her, something very crazy with her. And then on the other hand, you had, like, you know, my father, his side of the family that I really didn't have any contact with. So I didn't trust them either, because I didn't have, like, a trusting relationship with them. They were, like, new to me. They were like somebody coming out of the blue and telling me, well, yeah, this is your mother, she's lying, blah, blah, blah. But then on the other hand, she's like, oh, well, they did this, they did that, they're crazy, blah, blah. And then, like, I didn't know who to trust. And so I had to rely on myself. I had to rely on what I could see, what the facts that I could prove, the evidence, right? Like, talking about, like, a criminal trial, like, you know, like, I'm the prosecutor, I'm trying to prove the evidence, or, like, maybe I'm the jury, right? And everybody else is, like, the lawyer and the prosecutor, they're trying to prove one side and the other, and I'm just like, show me the evidence and then I'll make my decision. And oh, bless you, Kojo. So it was difficult. And I want to talk about how when I was 15, so my mother, when I was 18 months old, had a schizophrenic break, divorced my dad, blah, blah. The divorce itself didn't happen until I was like 3 years old. It was a long, drawn out divorce, and then they've been fighting this battle like ever since. But when I was 15, my mother gave custody to my dad, because at that point, our relationship had broken down so bad to the point where I was being forced, like, court ordered to go see, like, a psychiatrist and a family therapist, like, and all this. And they convinced my mother to give custody to my dad because she didn't like me either at that point. And it was just so obvious that we had no relationship and that things were, like, really bad between us, like, so bad that we couldn't live in the same house anymore. And her schizophrenia had degenerated severely by that point. Like, even the medications, like, all they were doing were just sedating her. Like, it wasn't a good thing. And so they convinced her to give custody of me to my dad when I was 15. Now, I didn't meet my dad until I was 15, so it had only been like a few months that I even, like, knew him at this point. And then my dad had saved all of the records from the divorce, from medical records, criminal records, the Child Protective Services records. Boy, that's its own thing. I read all 208 pages of that one. But I started reading, you know, the things that are, this is an objective third party, right? This is a government party, this is a lawyer, Child Protective Services, like, these are all third party, like, somebody wrote this down, this is a fact, this is an outside view, this is not just the he said, she said, who do I believe, who's lying, right? This is, it's not a lie, it's a fact. And some of the things I read in there really helped me understand my mother better, and not in like a good way. Like it just helped me understand things better, and it helped me prove to myself that yes, my mother was lying. Cause like there were things in there, like she told a judge, she like freaked out. She thought that my father had killed my grandfather and that she had a vision of him lying in a pool of his own blood when he was like perfectly alive in another state. He was okay. He didn't die for another like 10 years. And then there was one where she told a judge that my father was a James Bond villain and could read minds. Like, like this is written down in a court transcript. And at one point, she told Child Protective Services that she would rather drive us children off the pier than to ever let us see our father again. Like just straight out told them that she would rather murder us than let us see our biological father, which is just crazy. And I even saw like the most like heartbreaking thing when I read all these documents was when my mother said, well, not when my mother said, when the CPS agent said, "We do not recommend the children remain with the mother." And that, when I read that, I looked at my dad and I was like, they left us with her. Why would they write that if they were just gonna leave us with her? Like, what happened that they didn't act on that? They said that we shouldn't remain with her. Why did we get left there? And that, like, as a 15-year-old girl, right, I have a terrible relationship with my mother. It was absolutely awful. And I was so, like, I was confused about stuff growing up. I didn't really understand it. I finally get this, like, literally, it was 2 laundry baskets full of paperwork that I went through. It was a lot of information, and I don't remember it all. But, like, having something like that in my life to just totally confirm. It was really, it was to confirm that what I saw in my life growing up, that was real, right? It wasn't what this crazy woman said. It wasn't what she was lying to me about. What I saw was real. And when I was like, yeah, there's something wrong with my mother, I was right about that. Like it was very affirmative, whatever you want to call it. But that getting those laundry baskets full of information was a lot for me, and it was good for me, and it really changed my outlook on my mother in so much that I stopped having doubts about whether she was pure evil or not, because at that point it was confirmed. She is from my point of view, my mother is the pure embodiment of evil. Like Disney villain, evil stepmother. That's how I always viewed my mother growing up. But after getting those laundry baskets of information, that was confirmed to me that that's who she really was. So my mother at 18 months old when I was 18 months old, my mother became the pure embodiment of the evil stepmother from Disney movies. That's who my mother is to me. Oh, I should drink water between these. When I was 18 months old, my mother had a schizophrenic break and divorced my father and totally destroyed my family. My whole life's trajectory was completely torn apart, changed, whatever you want to call it. She then went on to get a restraining order against my father, accused him of all kinds of shit that I know he didn't do because I read the paperwork that said he didn't do it. much later on in my life. She went on to be the worst mother ever. Like, I have not met very many mothers that were worse than mine, just short of mothers who like kill their own children, right? That's a little bit worse than mine because my mother didn't actually kill me. She just threatened to, and she just threatened to kill me to a federal government or whatever, state government, the CPS agents. She threatened to kill me to the CPS agents. She didn't actually kill me. So I do understand if your mother actually kills you, yeah, she's probably worse than mine. But she also went on to keep me from meeting my father until I was 15. So when I was in middle school, my sister actually ran away to live with him. She was 17 at the time, and in the state of Oregon, if you are 17 years old and with a biological parent, you are not considered a runaway. So there was absolutely nothing my mother could do to get my sister back at that point, even though she tried, even though she paid her lawyer a bunch of money to try, whatever. So my sister, when I was in middle school, then she would like call on the phone and I would talk to my father, which we were not allowed to do legally. Like my mother had a restraining order against my father, and I was not supposed to talk to him. He wasn't supposed to talk to me. He had no contact order with us unless there was supervision. So like there were a few times in my very early childhood where, you know, my mother was like scrapbooking and she was like, okay, you can talk to your father. Right? You guys can talk to him and he can talk about like, oh, it's happy birthday, whatever. So like there were a few times when I had that as a child, and it wasn't very frequent. Like I want to say it wasn't even once a year. Like the number of times I had a phone call conversation with my father as a child growing up was very low. And then when I was in middle school, when my sister lived with him, she would call us. And so we would, I have two sisters, so it's my oldest sister and then my middle sister. So my oldest sister would call us, me and my middle sister, that middle sister and me, we would talk on the phone from my mother's house, my oldest sister and my father's house, and we would have conversations with my father, and I got to know him a little bit more that way. And of course at that time he was on his best behavior and he wasn't gonna be an asshole to us, but at that time it was mostly him trying to explain to us like what happened with our mother when I was 18 months old, right? When I was 3 years old, like what was going on in my mother's life, what was going on in my life, like how things transpired. And that was when I was introduced to the idea that she was a schizophrenic, and I did eventually see the paperwork that he gave me later, but I didn't know before that, so there's a lot of things I didn't know, and so he was really explaining things to me in my life that were difficult for me, that were confusing to me, and that clarity he gave me was great, but I feel like it also maybe made me feel like he was going to be a better father than he ended up being, because when I was 15 years old, my oldest sister came and got me. Now, we lived in different states. I lived in Washington. I grew up in Seattle, in that Seattle area. My father lived in Oregon. So, and he retained his status in Oregon because in the state of Oregon, if you get divorced, then the custody case will stay in Oregon even if you move away. And now he knew my mother was going to move back up to Washington, back up to Seattle, where all the family was. So he stayed in Oregon just to retain like the courts down there, retain the custody courts down in Oregon so that he could get custody of us back at one point. Now, he only ever got custody of me back because I was the youngest. I have 3 older siblings and I was the youngest. So when I was in high school, my freshman year of high school, I asked my sister, hey, can you come get me? I don't want to live here anymore. I can't live with our mother. Come get me. And so she drove up to Washington State. She picked me up, drove me back down to Oregon, and I met my father for the first time. And I say first time even though like I had contact with him up until the age of 3, but I don't remember him from that time. I don't remember my father. I have maybe a little like glimpse of a memory from when I was very young, but as a child, I didn't realize that was a memory. I thought that was a dream I had, and then I didn't think of it really as a memory until actually after I met my husband, and I talked to my husband about it years later. But as a child, I did not remember my father. So I say I met my father for the first time at 15. I was like maybe 14 because my freshman year of high school. It was over winter break. And it was good to meet him the first time. He was very loving to me the first time we met, and I had no idea who he was. It was like a stranger. I really, even though I talked to him on the phone, it was really like, you know, you were told somebody was your parent, maybe you saw pictures of them, which I hadn't. I didn't even know what my father looked like at the time. I'd never really seen a picture of him. But it's like if you were online, right? You were on Facebook or something and you were told, oh, that's your father. And then you talk to that guy a few times, and let's say you even like call him up on the phone. You're like talking on the phone. And then all of a sudden you meet him for the first time, and it's like, I have no idea who you are. Like, you don't feel like my father. Like, this isn't what I thought having a father would feel like. So it was strange, I want to say. I was relieved to be away from my mother for wasn't even 24 hours. It was less than that before the cops came and drugged me back, and then there was a lot of issues with that. I'm not happy with the way they dealt with that, you know. The Justice Department does have its issues. But yeah, so I met him for the first time when I was like 14, and then I got dragged back to my mother's house, blah, blah, blah. Had to be forced to go live with her. They sent like a cop out like a few days later to come talk to me, whatever. And I was like, no, I hate my mother. I don't want to live with her. And then, because in the state of Washington, if you run away over state lines, you are considered an at-risk youth, right? So I was put in this like youth program with the criminal justice department with like people who steal, people who do drugs, like people who don't go to school, like bad kids. Like I was a good kid. I was really a good kid. Yes, I had anger issues, but that's because of my mother and the situation I was placed in growing up. But I in general, I was a good kid. I didn't do drugs. I didn't skip school. I didn't sleep around. Like I wasn't a bad kid. I really just wanted to keep to myself. I wanted to paint, I wanted to sew, I wanted to read a book, I wanted to do like my crafts. I really just wanted to be left alone and left to do my like creative projects. And so I was put in this program, and I ended up having to go to court like once a month to literally talk about why I didn't want to do the dishes and talk about fighting with my siblings, which is totally normal. And I missed so much school from this. It was so stupid. But the court, because of the at-risk youth thing, court ordered me to go see this like family therapist who essentially started crying and kicked me out of the room every time I had to go, because I was like, I don't want to live with my mother. I don't like my brother. My sister's sitting in the chair I want. I'm gonna kick her out physically. I'm gonna pick her up and kick her out. Like they didn't, he didn't appreciate that. But he would just start crying rather than, like, he was the only therapist that never asked me to sit in the room alone and just like talk to me, and never asked me my point of view. Never, like, I don't think he ever even understood anything about me because he didn't try, and he was terrible. So that guy clearly wasn't working. So my mother had like always forced me to go to therapy. So she ended up finally taking me to a psychiatrist and a psychologist who were like a team, and they worked together, and I actually liked them. But so I was seeing them like in conjunction with this family therapist guy, and like essentially she took me there thinking they were gonna diagnose me with something, and that they were gonna prescribe a medication, prescribe a treatment, and then I was gonna be drugged up like all my siblings and just give in and stop fighting back, essentially, and just do what she did to my siblings, which was get them to, I don't know if it was like she broke down their willpower, or if it was the drugs, or if it was like a combination of the two, or maybe they just didn't have the same personality I do, because I know I'm very different than my siblings, and I live my life very different than my siblings even now. But I refused. I absolutely refused. And the only medications that, because they told my mother, right, I'm a good student, I don't have a lot of friends, and I do have problems with people at school, but I do have friends, right? And then they're like, okay, so when we're looking at a mental illness, we want problems in all 3 areas. I have 2 areas where I don't feel like I have a problem there. It's fine. I am only acknowledging that there's a problem at home. That's that 3rd area. And my mother says, oh, well, yeah, there's a problem at home, blah, 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 blah. So we're all agreeing there's just a problem at home. Like, school is fine. I have good grades. I have friends. Even though I'm getting bullied, whatever, I'm not, like, crying about being bullied. Like, I was okay being bullied. Not okay, but, like, I dealt with it in my own way. And that's, like, its own thing. So they were like, no problem at school, no problem with friends, just a problem at home. So she was trying to get me like diagnosed with something, and they're like, no, we can't diagnose her with anything. The only thing that they could do was say I was sleeping about 5 hours a week, because I couldn't sleep with my mother in the house. Like, my freshman year of high school, I just couldn't be around her. And like, I want to explain it this way. One of the creepiest things my mother ever told me was, I came and checked on you last night while you were sleeping. And normally, like, that would be fine for a parent to do, fine for a parent to say, but I didn't sleep that night. I just want that to sink in. So, I didn't sleep very much at all that year, and my grades actually did struggle from it, and I did retreat from my friend group a little bit that year. But the only thing that they did prescribe me was melatonin to try and get me to sleep more, because they were like, here's a graph of like your age and how much you should sleep. And like, clearly I was in like the bottom 1%. I wasn't sleeping enough. They're like, you are sleeping so poorly, like you're gonna need to sleep for a year to like make up for all the sleep debt you have. So she tried to force me into taking this melatonin, and I was like, no, I can't sleep with my mother in the house. I don't want to sleep with my mother in the house. So I would take the pills, I'd go over to the like bathroom, and I'd spit them into the toilet, go to the bathroom, flush it, and they were gone. So I refused. I absolutely refused to take that medication. But they ultimately, because they weren't bad, like the psychiatrist and the psychologist duo, not the family therapist guy, they were ultimately able to see me for who I am and see my mother for who she is. And they were able to convince her that like the reason why we have so many problems in our relationship is because we just couldn't live together. We just could not do that. So they convinced her to give custody of me to my dad when I was 15 years old. I don't know if that's like a good place to stop. Maybe I'll break this up into a few bits, and then maybe I'll just play this all back so you get the whole story. I'm probably rambling a bit, and this probably isn't all coherent, but I'm gonna try. I'm really trying here. I moved in with my father when I was 15 years old. I actually met him for the first time when I was 14, other than like a few phone calls. And I was kind of lied to about how good of a father he was going to be. He ended up being a drunk, right? He ended up being like an asshole. And there was a very different relationship between me and my father and me and my mother, because they're very different people, right? She's just crazy, mentally ill, but he's this like alcoholic, narcissistic asshole. And since I didn't really know him growing up, I wasn't really prepared for all that when I did move in with him. And of course, like when I first moved in with him, he was on his best behavior. He was all nice, whatever. And I had my oldest sister. She lived there too. I have 2 other siblings that still lived with my mother. So my oldest sister was there, and she would kind of step in and like separate us and make it so that my father couldn't like beat me up, and that like I guess I wouldn't instigate him or whatever. So when that changed, like when she moved out, the dynamic got worse, and he started like really being an asshole to me and really being a problem. But I don't know, it's hard to explain some things, but when I was a child, I always wanted to know what it felt like to have a dad. I always wanted to know my dad. I wanted to have that relationship, even though I was told, well, your father's been to prison, right? He's an asshole, he's terrible, blah, blah. And some of it was true, some of it was not. So I did hear a lot of lies from my mother about my father, but some of it was true. He really was an asshole. And he did go to prison. He got a DUI. He was actually a pastor, and he got a DUI on Good Friday. So, that's a problem in and of itself. But like, most of the things that my mother told me that my father did to me, like as a kid, like when we were going through a divorce already, like she accused him of all kinds of shit, and he didn't do that. Like that was all a lie. And he did show me like paperwork, and I read that, and I found out that that part was a lie. So I was willing to give my father a chance, and obviously I couldn't live with my mother anymore. That relationship was over. So I was willing to try and give having a father a chance. And I quickly realized that when your father is just this like narcissistic, alcoholic, like we went to like parent teacher conferences at one point, and I was a great student, right? I really put a lot into like learning, and I was like active in class. Like I was the kid who would be like, yeah, teacher, we had homework, just to like piss off the other kids. Like I was that kid. Like I was a good student. And we went into parent teacher conferences, and it was just nothing but insulting me. It was nothing but trying to make me look bad in front of my teachers. And they like looked at him, and they're like, no, she's a great student. Like she has a very vibrant personality. Like, you know, it was kind of nice to see some of my teachers defend me there, but like that's basically what I dealt with. I dealt with like an asshole father who didn't really like me, and essentially my parents were at war with each other. And when my mother gave custody of my dad, that was like my dad finally won one of the battles in the war, and she had no recourse for winning that battle or like taking over. Like she had lost me, and she had already lost my oldest sister. And then at one point, my middle sister also, when she turned 18, she came and lived with me and my dad and my sister for like a year. And my mother really hated that. But like everything it was like this, the divorce was a war, and it was like this constant custody battle from when I was 18 months old to when I turned 18. Like this was a very, very long war. And he never treated me like a child, or like his child. Like he just treated me like a pawn between him and my mother. Like it was like, oh, well, I'm winning this from your mother, I'm winning that, oh, she's losing. Like it's just very, it didn't feel like what I thought having a father should feel like. And on top of that, he was an asshole and abusive and whatever, and like I just didn't like my father. And so I left when I was 18, after I graduated high school. I worked for 2 months to save up enough money to get like a plane ticket to go live with my aunt and uncle. And by that point, my other sister had lived there because she couldn't stand living with her dad because he was an asshole. So it was weird. I think I lived with my dad for 3 years, my sophomore, junior, senior years of high school. And growing up as a child, I had like this fantasy of what my father would be like, and he really didn't live up to that. And I want to say that really affected me in like, that was my the grass is not greener on the other side like realization. Like I finally came to the understanding of what that statement really meant. And I was very disappointed that that was what my father was, because coming from like a schizophrenic mother who's just so crazy I couldn't stand to be around her, he really didn't have to do much to be better than that. Like he didn't have to try to be a good dad. He just didn't need to be bad. Like if all it was just like a lazy alcoholic guy who just wanted to like sit on the couch, like a deadbeat dad, right? If he was really just like a deadbeat dad and not engaged in my life, but like otherwise not really harming me, like not being an asshole to me, not causing me problems, like if he was just like there and let me do my own thing, because I was a very independent child and I still am, and I just feel like like I say, I don't tell him because I don't talk to him, but I've like told the, family and other people that like he had a second chance with me and he screwed it up. And he really didn't even need to do that much to be a better father than my mother was a mother for me. Like he didn't have to try. He didn't have much to do. Like I would have been just like happy with a dad who like was nothing. And he turned out to be an asshole and he really screwed it up. But I don't know, meeting my dad I was 14 when I first met him, and I was 15 when I moved in with him, and that really affected me, and I think it does affect me in life, and it's a wonder I don't have daddy issues. And I've talked to people about it before, and like I've had a lot of people that are like, well, why don't you have daddy issues? Why aren't you dating some like 70-year-old guy? Like what's going on with you that you don't have all those issues? Because like statistically, with the relationship I have with my dad, I should have a lot more daddy issues. I should have a lot more problems with that. But I think what happened is, since I was 15, like I was an independent child, like I really like formed my own identity within myself. Like my world was anything I could see, anything I could verify, because I had to like defend myself from everybody around me. I had to defend myself from my bullies. I had to defend myself from my mother. I had to defend myself from my siblings. So like I was very independent. I like had my own world I lived in. My world that I lived in was not the same world as everybody else lived in around me. And so like when I did meet my dad, I was my own person. Like I didn't need him to influence me. I didn't need him to raise me. I didn't really need my father to be a father. I needed him to give me a place to live. So I didn't have to live with my mother, and just until I turned 18. Like that's really what I saw my father as when I moved out of my mother's house. Was like, oh, I get to meet my dad, whatever. But then really it was just, I guess maybe I didn't have the right expectations of what my father would be and what I needed him for, because I really just needed him to give me a place to live until I turned 18. And then he proved he wasn't going to be a good dad, so like that was still fine. And I did want to meet him at first. I did want to live with him at first because he was nice at first, but I didn't really know who he was. But things didn't work out, so I left. And that was a good decision. That was a decision I have no regrets over at all. It was healthy for me to leave that that situation, that relationship, and it has been much, much better for me to not have any contact with my father. And I know family estrangement is difficult for a lot of people. It's been difficult for me. I don't want to say that, like, you know, my life is so happy, oh, everything's like roses and butterflies and rainbows, because it's really not. And I've had a lot of problems in life, and I've had a lot that I've had to deal with, and it's been difficult. But overall, it's better not to be around him. Better for me to not be around him. Family estrangement is sometimes necessary if your family is toxic, abusive, you just can't be around them. They're worse for you than if you're not. Like, sometimes family estrangement is good for you. It is necessary. And that's the choice I made. I made it over 10 years ago. I haven't seen my father in 10 years, and I haven't seen my mother in 15. It's actually been like a little up or down from that, but like that's the general gist of it. And as an adult, like, the farther I get from them, right, the more years pass, the longer I've been on my own or married, right, the longer I've been out from underneath their, like, I don't want to say protection or wing, I really want to say like control, like out of their control, because I really felt like the government essentially makes it so that your parents control your life until you turn 18 and you become a legal citizen, like you become a legal adult. That's when, like, they stopped being able to control me, and I was able to go and like control my life and control myself and all that. So as an adult, the longer it's been since I cut off contact with my parents, the longer I go, the, like, I don't want to say the easier it becomes, because it's not like it was ever an easy decision to make. It was just a necessary one. And the other thing for me is that I didn't have emotional attachments to my parents because they never treated me well. They didn't raise me right. They weren't good parents. So I didn't have an emotional attachment that I had to break. I didn't have to break from that. It was just always like an obvious, I need to get out. When I turn 18, I'm leaving no matter what. And that happened when I lived with my mother, and that happened when I lived with my father. That thought process never changed. It was always, I need to get away from my parents, whoever the parent was at the time. And when I was 18, like when I first moved away, I went and lived with my aunt and uncle, and one of my sisters was already there. I want to say, like, I didn't know how to talk to other people appropriately about family estrangement, because to me it was just, I hate my parents, they're terrible, awful fucking people, and I want absolutely nothing to do with them, and it's much better for me to be away from them because then they can't abuse me. Like, that was like my thought process. And now, like, I can agree, right? That is still accurate. That has not changed. But if I just go up to people and I say that, it like rubs people the wrong way. It's like rubbing them the wrong way. Like, people don't like that. And I did learn, it took like, you know, a few years to really like understand what it was that I was saying that rubbed people the wrong way when I talked about my parents. And I really like broke it down to, like, does somebody care about me? Like, as a person, is somebody interested in me and my backstory? Or is this a stranger that really doesn't care about me, and it's just like, maybe it's just a coworker, maybe it's a random stranger on the bus, or maybe it's like a family friend who has no context for what I'm talking about. Like, those kinds of, like, sometimes it's not the right time and place, right? There's a right time and place for everything, and there's a wrong time and place for everything. So I did eventually pick up on, like, what situations it's not socially appropriate to bring those things up. Like, maybe I talk about it in a different way or whatever. And like, I want to say, like, Mother's Day and Father's Day are like the two biggest times when people just don't want to hear about my family issues. And like, anytime I would like I was like working at Target, right? And this lady comes in and she's like, oh, did you know it's Mother's Day? And I was like, absolutely not. I hate my mother. Like, she didn't want to hear that from me. That wasn't like gonna get me anywhere. That wasn't gonna get her anywhere. That wasn't gonna help, because really all she wanted to know where the Mother's Day cards were. Like, that's all she needs. She came to me because I worked at Target. She saw my little red shirt and khaki pants and was like, want to know where the Mother's Day cards are. I don't need to, and what I know now, it's called trauma dumping, like, right? She doesn't need to hear my whole life story. And so, like, as an adult, like, I was an adult at the time, but like as the time goes on, I would just like reply to that with like, no, I don't celebrate Mother's Day, right? Like, I'll take away the like the shocking part of it, like the shock and awe, because it's never that I was like trying to instigate like a shock and awe thing. I wasn't trying to get a reaction from people. That's never what it was. But like, I understand like the little like social cues and shit a little more now. So like, I would just say, no, I don't celebrate Mother's Day. How can I help you? Like, I'm working there, right? And so there's just like things like that. Like, I've learned the like appropriate time and place to talk about things like this. And I've had some people that I've really like connected with on this subject that like really want to know more. They ask questions, right? They're interested, or maybe they have a similar life experience, or maybe their life experience wasn't the same, but they want to know like the different side of it. So I've learned a little bit more about people. I've learned a little more that, you know, not is it just that my situation is abnormal, because I did always grow up knowing my situation was abnormal, and that making the decision at 18 to just completely cut off contact with my parents and never look back was not a normal thing to do. And like, I understood a lot of people didn't do that, but like, I guess I wasn't prepared for just the like societal backlash of doing that, even though it was like a totally justified and good thing to do. And I feel like some people have been a little too harsh to me about it, because like, I was young. I didn't know that people don't like that, and that they just get like an adverse reaction to it or whatever. And then there's been other people. Now, I read a lot of studies, and I read a lot of anecdotes and stories, and I take in a lot of information around me. That's how I operate in the world. That's how I get along in this world, is I take in as much information as I can, and I verify what is a fact, I verify what is subjective, and I make my opinions and views based on like a combo of all of that. And something I've realized is boomers were shit parents. If you're a boomer, chances are you were a bad parent, or that like maybe you weren't as good as you think you are. And a lot of millennials, there's actually a growing trend of millennials who are cutting their boomer parents out of their lives. Now, I was early to that game, right? I was 18 when I did that, but to see that like, I would say it's like a quarter of the population of millennials now have cut out contact with at least one of their parents. And so, you know, when I meet people that have done that, I now like don't get the same reaction, right? Because there's a lot of people my age that are doing the same thing. But there's also, on the other end of it, there's a lot of boomers whose millennial children have cut them out of their lives, and they get very sensitive about this topic. And there was like, it was actually this one woman that I worked with, and I worked with her at like 2 different places I worked with, and she was like in the friend group at one that didn't really like me. And so when she came to work at the other place I worked at after, like, she didn't get along with me, but she didn't work there very much. It was just like, she still worked at the old place. And like, I don't know, it's weird. I don't need to tell you about my coworker relationships. But anyway, she ended up coming to this like after work event that we had. And I must have like tripped over something, because I made a comment about how like, there are no bad children. It's all the way their parents raise them. And it wasn't directed at her. It was actually like directed at this like customer we had earlier in the day. It was like, oh yeah, you just need to beat your children. And it's like, no, that's why they don't like you. That's why they act up, is because you beat your children. And like, so it wasn't even directed at her. And she just had this like, excuse me, what did you call me? And I'm like, one, I wasn't even talking to you. Two, I wasn't talking about you. Three, I didn't say anything about or to you. I have no idea what you're getting upset about. But like, I just tripped over something with her because apparently her son doesn't talk to her. And I didn't know until that point, because you never know what somebody else's life experience is until you talk to them. And it was very clear that she didn't know who I was. She, like, even though she like developed this opinion that she didn't like me because of whatever friend group she was in, she never took the time to talk to me, to get to know me and know where I was coming from. And, you know, it turns out that she and I are on different sides of the aisle. And that blew up a bit. That was a problem. Not too much of a problem. It actually didn't go much more past that day, because she didn't actually work at the new place very much, only every once in a while. She was still working at the old place. But it's like I don't know. I've been told that I should talk about this online, since I do have a YouTube channel, and I am comfortable with talking about these things. It's not like I have a problem talking about it. It's just that I've really stopped talking about it after a while because of the reactions people give me. And it feels like people have no interest in it, and people don't want to hear about my family problems and the drama or whatever, unless like they bring up the topic of parents, and I make it very clear I don't have parents. I don't talk to them. They never treated me like they were parents. Like, they never fulfilled the role of being a parent. Like, unless they like get past that discussion first and are interested. But like, realistically, that's not most people, and it's not most people I come into contact with or have these discussions with. And then every once in a while there'll be like an older woman who like wants to take me under her wing and like mother me and whatever, and it's like they kind of go overboard because I'm not used to that. And that was like, I've had a few coworkers, like a few like older women coworkers that like, you know, they'd bring me food or they'd buy me like little presents and stuff, and they'd like, you know, give me a hug at work. And it's just like, I did appreciate the like motherliness, because I didn't have that growing up. I wasn't used to that. It was kind of nice, but like it was also a little like, since I wasn't prepared for it, it was like too much for me. But yeah, I have no regrets. And I know a lot of other people who are like millennials who, I guess they don't have regrets about their parents, but like cutting off contact with their parents, but maybe they should, because their reason to cut off contact with their parents isn't necessarily as good as mine. And I know that's a bit of a judgmental thing to say, but I really feel like, from what I have heard from people who are estranged from their parents, that a lot of them do end up reconciling. Like, there's a lot that can reconcile, and they do. And I think that's great for them. I think that's like, ideally you should. Like, ideally that's what you want. And like, ideally my parents would just apologize to me and admit what they've done, and then we could at least have a conversation. And like, I've said, I will never have a relationship with my parents. I will never, ever have a relationship with them again. But if they apologize to me and are willing to admit what they did wrong, I would be willing to talk to them. I don't know that I would have a good conversation with them. I'm not gonna forgive them. Oh, excuse me. I'm not gonna like wanna, oh, here's my family, here's pictures, blah, blah. Like, no. But we could at least have a discussion about what they did and what they are sorry for. But I know they're never ever going to do that because they're still trying to blame me. 10, 15 years later, they're still trying to blame me for all their problems and still not take responsibility. And so if you are a parent whose child has cut all contact with you and has estranged from you, you need to apologize. You need to admit what you have done wrong because you failed as a parent. And realistically, a lot of boomers failed as parents, and you're not alone, you're not the only one, but it is your attitude that is preventing you from having a relationship with your child. So I just want to put that out there. And say that your child probably hates you. Your child probably had a very unhappy childhood and is doing what your child thinks is best for their family, for themselves, for their future, because they don't see you in their future. They don't see you as a good parent. They don't see you as having good intentions. They don't see you as providing for them. They see you as an obstacle to their thriving, being happy in life. They see you as an obstacle in their lives. So I don't know, maybe I'll leave that one at that. I've been kind of rambling a bit. Let's see. Now, has family estrangement, has cutting off all contact with my parents affected me and my life? Absolutely, yes it has. I was at the age of 18. I went to go live with my aunt and uncle. I lived with them for 2 years. When I turned 20 years old, I got my own apartment. I got my car, I got my own apartment. I lived on my own. I was entirely financially secure. I was totally independent. It was just me and my cat, who was an adorable baby boy. But I didn't have anybody really to provide for me. I didn't have any money, right? I didn't have any parents giving me money for food or for groceries, for rent, for college, whatever. I didn't have any financial assistance. I didn't have like someone I can just go to like cry when I'm upset. Somebody that I could go to and ask for help when I needed help with somebody. I didn't have someone that I could just live with rent free. Like, I had my aunt and uncle, but they were my aunt and uncle. They charged me rent. They didn't have the same kind of relationship I would have had with my parents because I didn't really know them as well until I was in high school even. And it just wasn't like it was loving and supportive, but more in like a sibling or an aunt and uncle sort of way. It wasn't like in a parental way. And I learned to get along in life by myself. Like I would look at kids my age. Now, I don't consider other people my age to be my peers. I really despise that term because I was bullied and ostracized from every single group, like everywhere I've ever like gone to school, everywhere I've gone to work. Like I've always at some point been bullied and ostracized from the group. So I don't consider other people to be my peers. But when we talk about other people my age, I realized very quickly that I lived my life differently than them, that most people still lived with their parents. Most people still, like, they go to college. I never ended up going to college because they wanted my parents' tax information, and I told them I don't have that, and they told me, okay, well, you can't come to school here. So I never went to college. And I would see these kids, I viewed them as kids, and I viewed myself as an adult, even though we were the same age because of like where we were at in life. I'd see these kids and think, well, you're going to college part-time, you're living rent-free with your parents, you're working part-time and wasting all the money you have, and like, I'm over here struggling to survive. Like, it just was very different for me. And like I said, I got bullied a lot growing up. So I already didn't have that like common ground with other people. And it just felt like that that got bigger, that like gap between me and the other kids I had in high school just got bigger as I became an adult and started living on my own and started having my own life, really. And I had a few friends. It's not like I had no friends, but like I did end up like building a social life over time. And I had like all my creative hobbies. I have all the things that I want to do, all the like very like solitude very, very like solitary activities I had. And I've always had a hard time connecting with people, and I feel like that's gotten worse as I've gotten older, and it's gotten worse with the way I view people. And like, I've been told I'm very judgmental, and I can see that I'm judgmental, right? Because I have to judge other people to be able to like judge what I want to do with my life, how I want to act. I have to judge other people to see, well, did that turn out well? Did that turn out the way I would have wanted that to turn out? Do I want to live that life? Do I want to live that lifestyle? Do I want to be that person? And so I judge all these things from people so that I can make decisions in my life and decide who I want to be, what I want to be, what I want to do, how I want to do things. And I can tell that like, I don't know, I'm never gonna fit in. Like, I'm never gonna make up for the family that I didn't have. I'm never gonna make up for that connection I didn't have with my own family. And I'm never gonna like build it with other people. And I did get married, like, right? I'm married. My husband and I, like, we really have a lot in common. We really talk about everything. And it's been like a connection that I can't really... like, I can't compare it to anybody else, because I've never, like, felt like somebody really, like, tried to understand me and cared about me and wanted to help me and provide for me and protect me and, like, take care of me in the way that nobody else ever wanted to. And so that took a lot for me to be able to even, like, have a husband and get married and, like, even have a boyfriend, because I didn't date in high school at all, because I was just, like... these kids don't really want to date me. These guys just want to come up and like their friends are daring them to ask me out, or like they're doing it as like a publicity stunt kind of thing. Like, I didn't trust them to actually want to date me. I also didn't have like the mental capacity, because I was dealing with like how awful my parents were. So I didn't date them in high school. And then I didn't date people until I was in my 20s. I didn't start dating until after I moved into my own apartment and I had my own life and I had everything under control, and I was broke as shit. I was really poor, but I was making ends meet, and I had, like, that was probably like the best time in my life was when I was like on my own, living independently and like figuring out the world within the like post-family estrangement. And that sounds bad because I'm married. We've had a lot of problems since we got married, like with health issues and financial issues, and like our house flooded like a month after we bought it. Like, it's not like we have a bad relationship. We have a good relationship, but our lives have been like so terrible since we got together because we've had so many like life issues like around it, and we've had a really strong relationship, and we've been able to stick together and push through it and support each other throughout all these problems. So like, I don't want it to sound like it's bad, but like, I had the least problems in my life when I lived on my own because I was in complete control of my life at that time, right? And that was very easy for me. That was like the most comfortable for me. And maybe I should say that like actually getting married was difficult for me because I was so independent that it's been hard for me to give up my independence, and it's been hard for me to depend on my husband, especially since like, you know, he's had problems with his job history. Like, since COVID, he's had a hard time getting and keeping like a stable job, and that's been hard on us. And I've been sticking with him, like I've been supporting him, like I help him try and find a new job, and like we're finally at a point where like that's getting better, but like we've had problems that like I think back to when I was on my own. Like I grew up very independent because like I didn't depend on my parents because they weren't dependable, and so it's been difficult for me to try and depend on my husband and try to depend on him financially because I had a foot injury. I actually had a few injuries in a row, but I tore the arch of my foot, and then that like triggered a bunch of health issues that I didn't know I had, and like I started melting down. Like I felt like just this like panic attack zombie all the time. Like it was like the first year we got married. It was like the year before we got married and the first year we got married, it was like really, really bad health-wise for me. And I had to quit working and I had to depend on my husband financially. And that was very difficult for me, especially since we were dealing with COVID and we were dealing with the COVID job market, and it was very hard for him to find stable, like good employment. And I do understand that not being able to depend on my parents has affected my marriage. It's affected my ability to depend on my husband, and that's been difficult for me. And like, you know, problems with other people aside, like I don't really have a problem not getting along with other people because I don't like other people. It's not a problem for me. It's not something that I really like it can be a problem, like at work, it can be a problem. If I'm forced to interact with other people, it can be a problem. But I myself do not have like a moral problem with not getting along with other people. Like I can be solitary. I can find my own things to do. I'm not going to get depressed about it. But I want to get along with my husband. I like to get along with my husband. I like when we have like a good relationship, and I do want to depend on him and be able to depend on him, but I know that my family relationship has affected that. And then I know as an adult that I'm really affected by my childhood growing up, and the steps I took to get myself out of those situations worked really well for me when I was on my own, but they didn't translate well to a relationship, to being married. And that's something I'm working on, obviously. I'm aware of it, so I'm working on it. But yeah, it's not something I was prepared for. And it's not something I really thought about before. And, you know, I haven't had a lot of relationships. Like, I dated one guy and he was an asshole for like a month, and then I broke up with him, dumped his ass, and then I met my husband like a year or two later, and like I haven't really like wanted to date a lot of people. I haven't been attracted to a lot of people because I am so independent, and I am so like, my identity is me. I know who I am. I'm not trying to attach that to anybody, but like when my husband and I met, it just made sense. Like, we get along, we want the same things, you know, we're attracted to each other, like all those things like lined up. And so I wanted to get married. I wanted to be married to him, and I still do. Like, we're committed. We're not gonna get divorced. Like, this is my life now. But it's a life that I wasn't prepared for, and it's a life that I didn't even really think about until about a year or two before it actually even happened. And I don't know what I'm trying to even say with this one, but like, having cut out contact with my parents, that's been good, right? Family estrangement has been very good for me, but cutting off a family has not prepared me for creating a family and having a family and making my own family. And since I didn't have good role models growing up, I didn't know what a family should look like growing up. I went from one bad family to another bad family, like going from my mother's house to my father's house, and like, it's difficult to like figure out how to interact within like a healthy relationship and interact within a healthy family and build that family up, rather than just say, no, I don't celebrate Mother's Day. I don't talk to my mother, like, right? It's very different, and it's not something I was prepared for, and I do see that it affects my life, and I'm thinking about, like, what can I do to make it better? What should I do to act differently in this kind of dynamic? And it's a long-term process. It's a long-term thing, and I know that I will never get to a point in my life where my childhood doesn't affect me. I'll never get to a point in my life where dealing with my parents never affects me, because it always will, and it's always going to negatively affect me, and I have to make conscious decisions to break out of that. I have to make conscious decisions to have a better relationship with my husband and have a better relationship with his family, who's now my family, and, you know, any future family that we're gonna have. And it's, I don't know. Do you guys relate to that? Do you have any relevance there? Does this make sense? Are you guys just lost and confused? I don't know. I'm probably done with this one. I've been rambling quite a bit, and I don't know if I even have enough coherent thoughts left to, like, make more of a coherent video. So I think I'm probably done with this one. Okay, that was kind of long. I'm gonna, like, post this video in different parts, but then this is, like, the full cut. You can see everything I talked about today. If you are intrigued and feel like I didn't talk about much, because I feel like I didn't even talk about that much, even though I've been talking for over an hour according to my camera right now. If you guys want to know more, let me know down in the comments below. Ask a question, leave a comment. I will reply to every single one of them that I can see, because sometimes YouTube won't show it to me. It's weird, but leave a comment down below, leave a question down below, and I'll get back to you guys on that. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and I will see you guys next time.